pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. The first order of business is board organization after the election 13 days ago.
So I'd like to make a motion that we swap chairman and vice chair. So Andy would become chairman and Dick would be vice chairman.
Second.
Yeah, I'm agreeable to that, if the board is.
Sounds good. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Andrew.
Does it start now?
I don't have a list of the other positions in front of me. I don't know if there's any desire or need to change those positions. If anyone's got a burning yearning to be on the planning board other than Fred, or Parks and Rec, or I guess I could do Budget Committee again.
We
Did a
got
good job on
Okay,
that.
fantastic.
We didn't get the budget. If there's no other changes at this time, and we could certainly change them at any time if
Mhm.
people have a desire, but is the group good with
Sounds-
leaving the assignments that we have as
Yeah.
they are?
Yes.
For now, it'd be great.
Okay. Well, that makes that easy. Okay, moving forward, we have, John Duffy had scheduled an appointment with us from the Pleasant Lake Preservation Association, and I think most of us, all of us, had received a little bit of advance notice about what Mr. Duffy would like to talk to us about, and certainly the hot seat is yours if you're ready to go.
So first off, I've given you a couple of handouts. One is the Pleasant Lake newsletter called The Ponderings, and then the other three-page printout is what we'll cover here today. It's pretty much, I want to first put into context what we've been doing, why we've been doing it, and where we are now at this point, and then talk about a project. I'll introduce some of the team here as we go along, and then sort of summarize at the end is, there is an ask in there of the town, and get to that. On the first slide, we've got a timeline here of what we've put together for a restoration plan, and it started, timeline we're currently on started back in 2014 when we applied for and were awarded a grant from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission to put together a plan for all of these projects that were coming, to you to get letters of support for, which we appreciate and work in conjunction with. As part of that, we retained an environmental engineering firm, FB Environmental, and we've been working with them. They put together the original plan, but we continue to work with them ongoing, so that relationship continues. That started in 2015, and right after that started, they pointed out the big problem we had with the lake was around the dam, the boat launch. And so that's when we started on, we applied for a 319 grant for what we call the Gulf Road project. Ann Schultz, who you've met before, and Tim Mallett were project leads on that. And we work closely with you and Mark and his team. And we really want to say thank you for all of the support and help we got on that. And that's pretty much done, with still some conversations with Fish and Game about the parking area and how that's water is impacting the area. And so I think there's still discussions going on, but that project is pretty much done. We moved on to other areas. These inlets and roadways are part of the pollutant load coming into the lake, but other concerns are around the property areas. So we work with New Hampshire Conservation Commission, applied for a moose plate grant. We were unsuccessful in 2017, but we were awarded a grant this year. That'll be finalized probably the next couple of months, and we'll start working on a project for property owners on the shoreline to, again, lessen the impact of phosphorus load on the lake. The final piece that we did was we also applied for another 319 grant to address runoff coming into the lake, into what we call the South Inlet, the 107 Inlet. So if you come from the Sidmore Christmas Tree Farm down the hill, there's a culvert that crosses the lake, and so it's the water running down the hill, both from the north and the south and the north, into that lake, and that's what we applied for back in the fall for the 219 grant. So as part of the association work, we assembled a team. Ann Schultz, you know, is head of our environmental committee, but Patrick Brochu took lead on filing for the grant for this, and he'll speak to the next slide. And Jim Irish and Joe Coronati are also part of that working, and they've been working with DOT, and we'll address that a little bit, and then come back to the summary. So, Patrick, if you want to come over.
So, thank you. And so on the second slide is basically, FBE is Forest Bell, obviously, that's the acronym Forest Bell Environmental. So last year was pretty active on working with this group of people and for the sole purpose of assessing the watershed area around, from Route 107, both slopes that basically meet at the culvert, what we call the Route 107 area. And that's basically right just before Ivor Johnson Lane. If you're driving from here to there, there's two culverts that go underneath 107. Plus there's also a lot of issues along the slopes, especially coming from the Sidmore Christmas Tree Farm. There's work that has been done in the past by the state, has not been properly maintained. That's been addressed as well. Plus there's also, as a result of this survey that was conducted starting last year, a lot of areas were identified for improvement from the homeowners, what can be done on the homeowner property, and that's basically the source of this grant application that we've got with the state right now that we're still awaiting word on, okay, status on. And basically it talks about, there's like 7-8 sites that were identified on both slopes that meet at the junction there, where some work can be done. Homeowner participation obviously involves state grant helping to fund it as well. One of the other areas identified, you know, as you can see in the recommendations on the left-hand side, was the area of Sweat Road and its contribution to the sediment that ultimately does reach Pleasant Lake. Again, this is all with regards to extreme weather conditions. A lot of this happens. And just a couple months ago, or within the last 30 days, we've had some of those extreme events causing issues. The state has now been more responsive due to some of the work that's you know, reaching out and just talking with the state and making them more aware of the issues on both slopes that meet down there. And plus there's also work that's part of the application process on this ARM grant. I'm not going to talk too much about that, John, the ARM grant at this moment.
Yep.
But, so, the net sum of it all is work is going on. We've identified areas of concern through Forest Bell. We're waiting approval from New Hampshire DES, a status on this last grant. If that is approved, then, you know, we'll take the next steps accordingly. But again, it's a combination of the lake owners, the DOT, New Hampshire DOT, as well as the town of Deerfield, and working with Mark Johnson as well on ideas, suggestions on how to address the Sweat Road impact. Mark Johnson. Excuse me, Mark Johnson's the guy I work with. Mark Young, I apologize. So that's pretty much a summary. You know, we're in a waiting stage right now, but we're also in an active stage working with other people, just besides waiting for the state of New Hampshire. Okay?
Thank you.
Jim and Joe, if you want to address conversations we had with DOT.
Kind of a two-part conversation. Joe Cornati is with Jones and Beach, an engineer. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the DOT. I did hand out 4 handouts up there. Unfortunately, I only printed out 4. Those are excerpts and pages out of the sediment study. Just to give you an idea, the first page, actually a road map from essentially Sweat Road down to a little bit beyond the inlet. And what happened during the February major event, and I got thinking, because I do some of this work on the side with my business, that that storm itself essentially eroded all the way out from Sweat Road, created an issue with the state. They had to clean it up, and eventually, as I mentioned earlier, that material just started meandering down the road. So what I did is called Dave Allman, who's the foreman for the state DOT shed locally, and eventually that got up to Brian Shute, who's the local engineer out of Durham. He's a supervisor, and we did a site walk about 2 weeks after that major event. And the bottom line is, you know, we've been having these storms, major events, probably about half a dozen a year, you know, 1 or 2 during the winter months, and then 4 or 5 during the summer months, where we get the gully wash, you know, in essentially 5 minutes, you get all the rain you'd normally get in a month, and that's the storm type that creates the damage and the runoff. So we did a site walk with Dave Allman, the foreman, and Brian, his supervisor, and the DOT engineer, starting both north and south of the inlet. And again, those are just partial pages to give you a flavor of what we did. The findings on that roadmap, essentially all the culverts or catch basins are all full. They're non-functional. And after talking to Brian, he goes, we'll get involved. And I made some suggestions, and I wanted to see if he would come up with the same idea. He did, and essentially some of the areas where, you know how up and down 107, they've been putting the little stone dams, you know, every 300-400 yards. Well, they really don't work. And so what he's looking at is during the high, or the areas of the high impact, actually putting the fabric and riprap down where it's needed to slow down the sediment before it gets to the inlet and try to contain it before it becomes a problem. We also looked at the crossing that's over the stream itself right there at the inlet, and all of a sudden, you know, I wanted to see if he would come to the same conclusion. There's some areas where you can actually almost push your foot through and the shoulders. So that is really deteriorating, and there's a picture of it, a profile view. But if you ever decide to walk out that way, it's going to need some work in the next 5-10 years, if not actually being replaced. So in a nutshell, DOT is committed to the work, coming out and cleaning up the culverts, making sure they're functional, cleaning up the catch basins, addressing the riprap and fabric where is needed to mitigate as best we can the storm runoff. And I'll leave it to Joe. Joe's got some ideas. When we were out there, he was included in the site walk, briefly covering some of the ideas he had, which is kind of separate from the DOT, separate from the town, but something we might have to do with maybe easements or getting some of the property owners involved.
Thank you. Joe Coronati, and as Jim said, I'm one of the owners at Jones and Beach Engineers, and I also happen to live on the lake, and I got involved with the Pleasant Lake Preservation Association in regards to this item as well. So I met with Jim and the DOT out there, and we looked at, there's obviously too much sediment running down the hillside. There's so some ideas on how to trap some of that before it gets into the river that leads to the lake, is creating some sediment traps somewhere along the way that can be easily maintained by DOT. They can drive by them and look at them, see that they're full, dig them out and get that sediment out before it ends up in the lake. We actually saw some of the sediment from as they paved 107 this year, you probably noticed that they backed up the shoulders with some sandy, gravelly material. That material, a lot of that is washed out all throughout town, not just at our location, but I'm sure that's all somewhere. That's all in some wetland or some stream, or so that material has turned out to be fairly ineffective at holding back the shoulder and the water. And in this situation, we had a snowbank that was basically at the edge of pavement, and the water just ran down the road, eroded the snowbank, and then took all that, basically that gravel right out. So right next to the road was maybe an 8-inch to a foot deep vertical trench that formed, and basically you could see the material in the lake on the ice. It washed out over the ice, and you could see the plume right in the ice itself, which is you don't get to see very often, actually trapped in time in the, so we did talk about how those could be much better material, something more gravelly, less erosive, and also all the side slopes, you may have noticed, over the years, they basically just went through and scraped all the ditches and removed all the vegetation all up and down 107, and they don't, for whatever reason, they don't put back loam, seed, mulch. They put a couple stone check dams in, and it takes a couple of years for that vegetation to come back when it's growing on top of gravel and sand, which is what's along the edge of the road. So we want to work with them to try to stabilize at least the hillsides on both sides of this stream as they come down, because both are still non-stabilized, and we're not allowed to do that in construction. We're not allowed to leave a job site like that, and so it's until those stabilize, this may keep happening. And then the sediment traps would help, and stone check dams. But DOT did agree that they would reevaluate it in the spring. We couldn't see anything when we were out there. The snowbanks were 3 feet high and completely iced in, and the same thing happened again a couple weeks ago, I think. After our meeting, I went by again, and the water was doing the same thing. It kind of comes out of runs down the road from Sweat Road for sure. It also comes out through the woods. And you may have noticed, if you're really looking closely, there's like an ice path, an ice stream that runs into the woods, where the water just comes right out of the woods into that ditch line as well. So I think we're going to hopefully be able to talk to them once the snowbanks are gone. The culverts were all full of sediment that we could see, and the ditch lines were certainly full of sediment all the way down to the river.
I think in summary, we wanted to come before you as I said earlier, thank you for your support of the Gulf Road project, and then bring to your attention the work that we're doing here, and that we see it as a collaboration between the association, New Hampshire DOT, and the town related to the Sweat Road impact on the watershed. And our ask is that you, I know we've been before you, we got the letter of support for this grant last fall. So would be to get your support to prioritize that as much as can be done with the current budgets. But we see that if we don't address all of these parts, the shoreline, the road 107 piece, and Sweat Road, we're going to continue to have issues impacting the lake. And then finally, looking forward, we mentioned an ARM grant that Ann is taking the lead on. Once we're done with this project, we could show the work that we've done here and go to the state for a much larger grant to focus on replacing that culvert and doing some work down at the actual inlet as it crosses 107. So, any questions?
Yeah, Fred?
You had mentioned that or Jim had mentioned that the culvert crossing 107, you can put your foot down through it. Is it eroded?
Next time you go out, essentially it looks like, it's from the 60s era, something like that. The one picture that I included, you can see the concrete erosion, and what happened, they probably drilled into it and put guardrails along the side.
Yeah.
That's all starting to become loose, and in between where they drilled to drive it in, they put a temporary fix in of bigger riprap to cover the holes. What happened, now the fines are going down through the gaps in that riprap, and it's gonna be chasing one problem after another. But if you get a chance to look at it, it's got a lifetime that's getting shorter.
Right.
Well, I can't speak for the entire board, although I think, given our past history, you can count on the board for support for this project, certainly with regard to any backup you need in attempting to land grants or funding. And I believe this board would also be interested in being proactive with regard to Sweat Road. That's our road, and if it's causing a
We need to
distinct
know.
problem, we need to address it.
Yeah.
And that said, we are on a default budget, and money is tight, but I guess, we would need to know the specifics of what the solutions might be and what you'd expect from us.
If I could, I'm going to volunteer him. But Joe and myself, we have a vested interest. We have property on the lake. And if we can help out, as well as John and all the efforts that he's done in this, more than willing to work with Mark to make this a successful solution, and the quickest, easiest, and most efficient cost to make it happen. So if we can help, we're willing.
Good.
Go ahead, Fred. I just think the sooner you get back to us, the better. I was down there this weekend and witnessed the thaw that was coming out of the woods. We really need to get going on this.
What would you like us to get back to you with?
Anything that will speed up the project.
Well, I think, in looking at the project, the information you've given us is certainly useful. Obviously, we've got control over Sweat Road, and we can certainly support you in anything you're asking from the state or from property owners, but we don't have too much of a lever there with regard to anything but Sweat Road. But we would certainly, I think this board would be willing to support whatever action needs to be taken on Sweat Road to mitigate the problem there. And certainly,
Brian-
it looks like it would mitigate all the other problems downhill if we could handle that.
Yeah, I wanted to be careful not to overstep our bounds and start making suggestions that the town road agent would be,
Oh, don't worry, we'll tell you or he'll tell you.
okay.
We can't do it,
We come up with
but-
recommendations, but again, we want to make sure we're staying within our bounds, so.
Right, don't
Happy
wait
to-
for us to come to you is where I was headed with it. You need to let us know what you need.
Yeah, I think we can, our next step is to meet with DOT, and maybe now we can meet with Mark Young as well, now, once the snow's gone, and we can see what everything looks like, and then we'll have a better idea of maybe where we're proposing to go or hoping to go.
We had no inkling of any kind of pushback from the DOT. It was more, how can we help and what can we get done? Right now, we're weather dependent and as the April rains come and everything else, but, they're willing to get on it. I was very, very impressed with Dave Allman.
Good. Yeah, Fred.
So DOT didn't put any grass seed down on those regraded ditch lines and stuff?
Not that I saw, no.
Oh.
Or hydroseed, I mean, and they
Yeah.
normally, I don't think, do, but they, you can still see there's spots around town when you're driving where you
Oh,
do not
yeah.
want to go off the edge of the pavement, and that's all fresh.
I know I had seen some of the check dams that they put in, and some of them made absolutely no sense at all of
Right.
why they put them where they did.
Right, they seem to go up slope a foot,
Right.
foot and a half, when they're not
Exactly.
really in the gully being a kind of a curve, and
Unfortunately, I think probably roughly 10 years ago, they seemed to adopt this scrape the culverts clean. And to take it one step further, I think they've encouraged local road agents to also follow their example on scraping culverts clean of vegetation and not putting anything back.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, in these areas, I think they're trying to just keep the road from freezing up, or
Yep.
they're not,
Keep the water flowing, I think. is
yeah, keep it
basically-
off the road and keep the road safe, not the ditch lines, so.
Well, I think this board certainly appreciates what you've brought to us for homework, and as I said, we have a, past history of supporting anything we can do to help you get funding, grants, that sort of thing, and we would certainly be interested in working on our property, the Sweat Road Junction, which, I'm no engineer, but certainly every time I drive by the end of Sweat Road and see gravel in the middle of 107, I can understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So as soon as we hear back from DES on the 319 grant, that'll be our next step. We'll get back to you.
Great, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Moving forward, I've got, no, Nick? Okay, just for those folks looking at the agenda, we will not be meeting with Nick Lawrence this evening. Moving down to regular business, we've got the minutes of March 11th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of March 11th.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. That's Fred and Jeff. Any changes?
Yes.
Corrections? Yes, Mr. Pittman.
I was excused, but it says that I called the meeting to order. So that should be changed.
Okay.
Jeff, I think Jeff ran the meeting.
So noted, and it does say after the pledge that Chairman Shute.
I'll abstain
Move
from
forward.
not being here.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Appears to be unanimous. Okay, we'll move to the vouchers and payroll. Okay, I've got an accounts payable manifest for a total amount of $65,073.32.
Make a motion to approve the manifest.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, that being Fred and Jeff. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I have a payroll manifest in the amount of $50,621.59.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Today, the 25th.
Yes.
I don't believe we have Steve with us this evening, do we?
I think we're supposed to just announce it.
Yeah, okay. Steve Gemelli is not with us this evening, but I'm going to announce that we will be presenting Steve with an appreciation award for 10 years of service, his longevity award. And hard to believe that Steve has been here for 10 years now, but Steve is our IT director, for those who don't know, here in town. And we'll certainly be
Does a great job.
forwarding this to him. He does do a great job. Okay. The property abatement, well, I'll just start with the signatures, the regular signatures, and then move forward. Okay, we have notice of abatement denial or request for an abatement denial. Actually, that's the first one, for Robert and Jeanette Wolfgram of 38 Church Street, Deerfield, New Hampshire. Avatar, our assessing officials have recommended that we deny the abatement request. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is.
I'd like to see it turned over to the state. Is it the I'm under the impression he doesn't agree with what Avatar said.
Right, so I guess typically we would deny it and he could appeal it,
Correct.
would be my understanding. So if we uphold the denial, he can appeal it to the state.
I'll make a motion that we deny.
I believe he's here. You'd like to speak to it? I'd like to speak.
Absolutely, please, I'm sorry.
Didn't even know.
Please take a seat at the microphone so we can get you on the record.
Obviously, Rob Wolfgram, I'm not really sure exactly the process on this, but obviously I put the abatement in. Just had the lot approved. I purchased it at the beginning of last year. I thought it was grossly overassessed what it was at. Actually, I thought I bought it over than what the value of it should have been. I don't know if anybody here knows Roscoe, but it was the opinion of the assessor that I got it well underneath market value. And obviously, everybody knows Roscoe Blaisdell. There's not a chance that he's typically going to be selling anything below market value. And if that was the case, he would have been selling it to somebody else, and I wouldn't be owning the property. But I did do quite a bit of research inside that packet, showing like properties that are in either similar or in acreage. One of the things that I was, when it was originally assessed and I got the assessment, it was shown that it was like properties of the same size. But if you look at it, it's got 2 acres of wetland, it's unimproved. You could see the amount of ledge that's in there. You could see what I call the sister lot, which was, I have the plot plan here. I know Mr. McGarry was actually on the planning board that approved it, but
And I think we have most of that information as well in our packet.
the only thing I didn't submit, obviously, was I only had one of the large plans that Roscoe had left to me, so I don't know if that is worth putting up, if you guys want to take a look at it, if that would help. I know I'm a pretty visual person, so.
So yours is the driveway with the ledge next to the road?
Yeah, yeah,
And then there's one further up that's got the swamp?
yes.
Right.
Yeah, and the swamp is actually kind of half in both of the pieces of property.
Okay.
So you see about 2 acres on my property and 2 acres on the other property. And you can see the other one that a construction company, it looks like they're gonna be putting a house in there. You can see that he's spent probably in the vicinity of $35,000, and he's got quite a bit more site to go. Which, my lot is assessed at 90-something thousand. And this other lot is assessed also at 90,000 with absolutely no improvements, when knowing that I'm gonna have at least 30 to 40,000 worth of improvements before I can put anything onto it. That's kind of where I'm seeing is unfair, as well as the condition of the lot, how much wetlands it is, and the comparison to the other lots that he has on, what he has as far as comparables. I just think it's quite a bit more. Like I said, I assessed it somewhere in about the 50 when I wanted to buy it. Roscoe obviously got me at 70 because it's right adjoining my property. I was looking to expand without having to sell my house and either move to another town or another property in town, and, willing to pay a little bit more for it and then have it assessed 30% above what I even paid for it.
So you don't plan on building on it?
It's up in the air right now. I might be building onto it, but it's probably not gonna be at least for 5 years. With how much money I invested into it, it's gonna take me a time to recoup some money to be able to do anything. But we have quite a few plans of building our forever home back there, renting our house out, or, building a duplex out there and renting it out. We have quite a few different plans, but, the extra tax onto it definitely pushes that further down the road, what I can be able to do with it. Because, that's that much more money I have to recoup, and so.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. I think most of the board members have seen this. Basically, what the appraiser did, the Avatar representative, they had 8 lots that they felt were comparable to Mr. Wolfgram's lot, which they had valued ranging from 59 to 130,000, 59 being well below the other estimates. I don't know what the board's pleasure is at this point.
I mean, if you look at a lot of the lots that he put on, they were very flat lots, either in a subdivision that had extensive site work done to them, so pretty much build ready. If you look at almost all the lots, there are none that are to the quality of my lot, as a completely unimproved with the ledge, crossing as far, having the house as far back as what it is. So that's really, I think it was a very unfair comparables that he had to it, because pretty much all of them were flat in subdivisions, almost ready, good to go to build on.
Well, I think there's sorry, Dave.
No, I just made the comment, what was your first name?
Rob?
Rob. That if we start second guessing Avatar, then we're gonna be in trouble, where if you go to the state with it, they're gonna do that type of thing. It's gonna be fairer to you and gets us off the hook as far as, we're not in the real estate, I'm not anyway, I have no idea how that compares, what we should be doing.
And how that would move forward is you would file an appeal with the BTLA, Bureau of
Tax and Land Appeals.
Appeals, yeah. And you'd have to do that by July 1st, and they would consider the the merits of the case.
And I could certainly attest that Roscoe doesn't sell anything at a bargain.
Yeah, it's, he buys low and sells as high as he can. That's how he makes his living. That's what he does, so. Yeah, it was the fact that he said he didn't put it on the market. That's how I got on the market. I mean, Roscoe is a market in himself with the hundreds of acres that he owns, so.
Right.
Well, we had a motion initially, and I don't recall whether that was seconded.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
I'll say it again to deny it, so he can take it to the BTLA.
Do we have a second for that?
Yeah, I guess I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, I think Mr. Wolfgram brought out some good points. But again, I guess I'd have to defer to Avatar and then have that, them go to the board.
I'll say, historically, we don't generally differentiate from what our assessor recommends, but
That's what I was afraid
That
of.
was one thing I kind of asked, even asking of Sherry if that was something I could have a conversation with the assessor to say, hey, did you take into this account? Did you take into this account? You know, did you look at the, you know, the plan of it or take a walk onto it so you can see as opposed to just going by acreage and proximity? And she said that wasn't allowed and, you know, so that was one of the things I'd asked well before I even came to, you know, coming before the board. But she said that wasn't either allowed or, I don't know what the forum is, but.
I'm not gonna second guess Sherry, because she does a good job, but I feel that it's hard to believe that you can't. We're paying them to do their job. I know when they do the town-wide deal, they'll actually set up a time frame when you can come in and talk to them.
well, we can either act on the motion, or we could, I guess if the board has some concern about that, we could talk to Avatar and see if they might be able to meet with Mr. Wolfgram before we make our decision, and Mrs. Wolfgram, before we make our decision on this.
I'd take back the motion if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good idea.
I was kind of hoping actually he would come and speak to the letter that he had wrote. I haven't actually been able to see the letter of denial. She said that obviously it was to the board, it wasn't to me,
Yeah.
so it wasn't allowed to be shown to me, so.
So I'll remove my motion.
Okay, let's, if Dick removes the motion, will the second?
Yeah,
Back
I
up.
agree to that.
Okay, I think what we'll do is talk with Avatar and see if there is potential for meeting with the property owner before we render a decision. And I think you've still got plenty of time here. If for some reason you're not able to meet with Avatar and we do end up denying the abatement request, you have until July 1st to file with the state of New Hampshire for an appeal.
Okay.
So I think we're far enough back so we can attempt to help you, and if we can't, you'll be in no worse a position than
It wants to be.
Yep.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, is that something that you're asking I meet with him on my own, or is that something that I would do at a Board of Selectmen meeting, so it's in a public forum, or what's the?
You would meet with the assessor on your own,
Okay,
and typically they will schedule appointments with people who are concerned about assessments.
okay.
Yeah, let us contact, we can contact Avatar and find out, you know, how we can proceed and what the availability is, and we can get that contact information to you.
Okay.
Do we have the Wolfgram's phone number so the Avatar can contact him?
I do not,
I
but,
do have it on the front of the abatement, everything from my cell phone, obviously my address.
Yep,
I live
okay, yeah, we
down
do.
the road, so.
we do have, actually, we've got a couple of phone numbers on the
Yeah, my wife's
application,
phone
so.
number as well, yeah.
Well said, you're on. Wonderful.
All right, we will delay acting on the abatement denial request then until we've conferred with our assessor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a request for a military tax exemption or tax credit. This is service connected to total disability, and this is for Michael Sullivan of 14 Middle Road. Everything appears to be in order.
Make a motion to approve the veterans tax abatement.
Second?
Very good, we've got a motion and a second. I'll check granted.
Need a vote, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Appears to be unanimous.
This one.
I have another application for a veteran's tax credit, and this is for Mr. Sidney Stenger of 226 South Road.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, all the paperwork appears to be in order. Signed and checked. All those in favor?
Aye.
Check granted.
You want to move seats?
Oh, that's fine. Okay. I have another veteran's tax credit request. This is for Taylor Milne, 13 Old Candia Road. Paperwork appears to be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I have one more request or application for veterans tax credit. And this is for the all veterans credit and service-connected disability. And this is for Mr. Cody Milne of 13 Old Candia Road.
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Paperwork appears to be in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, I'm gonna.
The documents you have in front of you are yearly agreements that come up from our alternate power source. We usually do business with Standard Power, who searches the market for our best price. There are two documents there. One is the annual agreement, and the second document is indicating a change in our alternate pricing for energy generation. They're recommending going with consortium. The consortium that we are part of with other towns in the state using Constellation Energy. And the main difference would be typically we do a May to September alternate power generation with a different energy supplier than Eversource. And that switches back to Eversource at the end of September. In this agreement here, they've searched the market as part of the consortium. We would change from a 6-month period alternating with Eversource to a 12-month, 4-year agreement to lock in a better rate for the town in energy supplying. And you have a chart in your folders which compare the pricing with Deerfield participating as part of the consortium as opposed to Deerfield participating alone. and you can see the price difference. So at this time, they're recommending going with a contract for 48 months versus the alternating 6 months with Eversource.
Yeah, and what I have is two agreements. The first is with Standard Power, being part of the consortium, and the second is the actual contract with Constellation.
Make a motion, the chairman sign both.
Second?
Further discussion on the two the electrical power agreements? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Appears to be unanimous. Sign them and pass them along. There's the Constellation agreement. There is the Standard Power agreement. Okay, moving forward, we have Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, the Division of Forests and Lands has contacted us. And this is regarding Federal Excess Property Cooperative Agreement. And I'm assuming this is the forest fire truck. And we agreed to accept the vehicle in its existing condition, to insure it, to provide Division of Forests and Lands with evidence of the vehicle's insurance, indemnify and hold harmless the state of New Hampshire for any and all claims for liability, register the vehicle, and keep the vehicle in good operating condition. We also agreed to use it within the legal specifications regarding weight and whatnot. I think it's probably in our best interest to continue the use of the forest fire truck, but
Make a motion to agree with, sign the agreement from the state for the forest fire truck.
Second.
okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
need a vote?
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's been a while.
Said that was only one of three.
Right.
And this is a form that assumes we have 3 select people, so. There's only 3 spots, so he passed. Okay, we have the 2019 reappointment list for forest fire rangers. And I'm, rather than vote on each one of these folks, I'm going to read the entire list of names. If for some reason you object to, I'm going to recognize the fire chief before I proceed because he's walking towards the microphone, so.
Yeah, so just to maybe clarify that a little bit, month and a half ago, I brought forward the reappointment forms. You folks approved them, sent them into the state, and that is just the master list, if you will, that they sent back. The only modification that I made to that one is Adam Gill. I have not reappointed him at this time because he moved out to Manchester.
Right.
Him and I working through some things to see whether or not he feels he'll be able to, dedicate the time living in the city of Manchester now. But that just basically is the summary of all the forms that have already come through, and
We don't even need a vote then, this is just a matter of.
still need
signing
some
it.
signatures.
It still needs signatures, so I'm gonna, just because it's an official form and we need to sign it, I think I'm gonna read the names and ask for a motion, so. And I will note, before I read the names, that, per the fire chief's recommendation, I will leave Adam G. Gill off the list. But, the folks that we have up for reappointment are Richard Butler, Alex Cody, John Dubianski, Matthew Kimball, Diane Kimball, Jeffrey Smith, Ben Blake, Raymond Bushy, James Lindquist, Cynthia McHugh, Doreen Shibelhoot, Matthew Fisher.
Motion to approve the list just read by the chairman for Forest Fire Wardens.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Could I ask, if you say Alex Cody, is it junior or senior?
The name I have is Alex E. Cody, which I assume is Big Alex. And I would also note that his email address looks to include his date of birth, which would make it Big Alex, who's actually smaller than Little Alex at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
Same thing.
I guess Alex would prefer we not say old Alex versus young Alex.
Some way they ought to distinguish.
What's the date? Let's go sign it too. Next in the signature pile, we have a directive from the town to Melanson Heath to go ahead and proceed with the annual town audit. Not a whole lot to be said about this. We need the audit, and Melanson Heath has served us well.
Yep.
So I would entertain a motion. There's one signature line.
Make a motion for the chair to sign.
Second.
Very well, further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Pass that along. We have a notice from New York Life Insurance Company. This is on life insurance policy that, it says the policyholder is the Deerfield Fire Department. I'm familiar with the Deerfield Fire Department's end of this. Does this also include the police department?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, this is life insurance for the fire department and the police department. As mentioned, it's through New York Life, and I believe the agent is Tom Green, yeah, who specializes in life insurance for first responders. And again, there is one signature line.
Make a motion to have the chairman sign for the New York Life for the first line.
This is included in the budget.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I've got a couple of personnel action requests here, actually 3 of them. The first is a request from the town clerk, and it's in regard to the deputy town clerk tax collector, that being Kim Crotty. She's looking for an increase in hourly wage for Kim. I know that Kelly Roberts, the town clerk, has discussed this with John as well, and I don't believe there are any budgetary concerns in moving this forward, but it is an increase from $15 per hour to $15.75 per hour that's been requested.
We'll make a motion to approve that.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there's one signature line here. for a second. Okay, and we have two other personnel action requests, and, okay.
You do have some documents on the left-hand side as well.
Yeah. I believe the fire chief would like to talk to us about the two in non-public, so I'm going to set those aside from the regular signatures. I'm gonna hand that back to John, actually. And we've got a couple of things that don't require a vote. The first is a letter from us to the Division of Motor Vehicles. Please accept this correspondence as formal proof and confirmation to authorize Kelly Roberts, Town Clerk Tax Collector, to be the designated municipal agent for the state of New Hampshire and the town of Deerfield for the purposes of processing motor vehicle and title transactions pursuant to New Hampshire RSA 261:74-A and per SAF 519.025B. If there's no objection, we just need to sign this.
Mhm.
And we have the report of appropriations actually voted at our town elections. This is the 2019 MS 232 form, which we need to submit to DRED and requires our signatures. If there are no dissenting opinions or disagreement, I would sign this and
Sounds good.
Yeah.
urge the rest of you to.
Andy,
Yes.
why do we report appropriations to DRED?
Well,
Usually it's Department of Revenue.
you're right. The form is from the Department of Revenue, and it is DRA. I was just looking at the D and the R and got ahead of myself.
I really was lost on that.
No, we're not talking about state parks or timber. We are talking about the appropriation. So that does go to the Department of Revenue Administration, Municipal and Property Division.
Thought so.
Thank you. And there's Kelly's too. We can pass that down.
That's cute.
Okay, review of correspondence. I don't think we have anything that needs to be addressed at this meeting. We've got a couple of bulletins from DES. We've got some communication from DOT. We've got the red line bridges list that's in here. Deerfield still does have a bridge on the list. That bridge is the culvert on 107, where 107 bisects Freeze's Pond. And I don't know exactly what the timeline for repair on that has been. It's been on their list for a while now.
I
I don't know if you do,
remember,
Fred.
it shows up on the 10-year plan.
Town administrators report.
Basically, my report was ticking off most of those extensive documents that needed to be signed. I think you've hit most of them. The remainder of the items to be reviewed are the fire rescue roof quotes and the R.B. Lewis proposal for fire and burglary monitoring.
Yeah, why don't we segue right into R.B. Lewis, as long as you're at the microphone there. And
Okay. We also have the building or facility supervisor here as well to answer any questions. He's been dealing directly with R.B. Lewis throughout this entire exercise. You do have a packet in your folders. I took the liberty of putting together a comparison of two different options that you have before you this evening. One would be continuing with the equipment currently installed through Skycom's original contract, and R.B. Lewis would simply take over the monitoring annually. The second which is a proposal from RB Lewis, and you have copies of that behind the comparison, would be, they recommend replacing the equipment that we were going to formally purchase from Skycom and installing that, which would be an upgrade to equipment that is currently used. Most of the equipment that we have in the building is no longer supported, and you cannot buy replacement pieces for it. So if we were to have difficulties with the current system, they'd monitor it, but would have to end up replacing it if something were to go wrong with it.
Yeah, so essentially, as everyone can see, we're looking at $11,605 versus $4,834. And I'm assuming that the recommendation of Mr. Ellis and probably yourself is that we consider replacing the equipment.
Part of the benefit with doing the replacement at this time is, as you've been formally made aware of, these buildings need some significant upgrades with our fire monitoring and burglary suppression systems. These new components would merge well with any upgrade we needed to do for the fire alert system, as opposed to trying to put in new fire alert equipment would not work well with the equipment that's currently installed in the building.
And I would note for the record too that RB Lewis is matching the monitoring costs that we have had previously from Skycom.
And at this time, he can only give me a not-to-exceed labor cost, because until they get in there and look at what the condition of the system is once they start replacing, it's unknown at this time, but his hope is to come below that estimate. But I asked him for a worst-case scenario.
With regard to budget,
My recommendation at this time, I've taken some time to look at some of the projects that we did have on slate for 2019, would be to use the Municipal Building Trust Fund for this upgrade. And that currently has a balance of $102,488 based on ending figures from December of 18, with the $25,000 warrant article that was approved during the last voting.
well, I think, I'm not going to go through the specific weaknesses in the system, but we've certainly heard them in prior meetings, and we have some of them listed here, and I guess to my mind, it would make sense to proceed, but I don't know what the board's pleasure is.
It's certainly the fact that the equipment that's currently in would not be able to be replaced easily, or repaired, I should say, with replacement parts.
He had difficulty trying to review the proposal from the current vendor for a buyout. Most of his suppliers were not even able to determine a replacement cost or a value to these pieces. Some of them are approaching 30 years old.
Oh, well. Yeah.
I just have a question. When we went through this the first time, I asked this question. What was it gonna cost us to replace this?
Mhm.
And I thought the answer I got was, we could use what we had. And now we're finding out we can't use what we had.
No, there still is an option. What I illustrated in my comparison is the equipment we have now works. We can maintain it, and RB Lewis is willing to come in and do the same monitoring for the same price that Skycom did. But what he's pointing out is that if any of this equipment should need repair or break down in the coming months or years, he would not be able to replace it. And some of the holdup in getting an actual equipment cost was with the current vendor getting me a list. And then he had to go out and research what it would cost.
Which is the two options, the 11,605 if we move forward with replacing, and the 4,834 if we stay with what we got.
And RB Lewis is willing to do whichever option the board would like to do. He's already given his quote that he will stick with.
4834 with what's here.
Yep, that's what's been indicated, that 4834 would get us through the year with what's here.
4834 would be the payout to buy the equipment at $3,530, plus an early termination of 1304,
Yep.
we would still be paying the
4260
4260 on top of that.
Right.
But we would pay that for monitoring anyway.
Mm-hmm, right. I see the current panic button system is not particularly useful apparently in emergencies. What are the issues there?
The Joint Loss Committee has gone over this for several years. The way the panic buttons currently work is that they identify a zone in the building, not an actual location. So that if one of the people in the offices upstairs were to activate their zone, it would only tell you that there is a problem at the front of the building versus someone, say, at Parks and Rec pushing it, or someone in the town clerk tax collector. It would indicate the middle of the building or the end of the building. It doesn't identify exactly where the problem is.
Andy?
Yep.
So, no matter what we do, we're doing the buyout? Is that what this is saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the board's already decided to go with R.B. Lewis as a monitoring company.
Yeah.
Correct. But then, if we go with them monitoring, we're still paying that $35.30.
Correct.
And then if we had problem, with Cindy's comment, if we had problem over the year, we could deal with individual smoke detectors or whatever, if need be.
Well, this is not the smoke detectors, these are the actual panels that operate the whole system. But yes, you're correct.
Well, I'd like to see R.B. Lewis in here doing that, but I agree with Cindy that we did ask that, and they said, excuse me, have that buyout, and we'd be all right for the year.
And I think we have that proposal. What we need to decide, I think, is if we want to spend $3,500 and an early withdrawal payment to pick up some 30-year-old equipment that might be nearing the end of its life if it
Yeah.
hasn't already, or if we want to spend the 11,600.
We're not buying that anyway. I thought we were under the impression we had to buy it anyway. I think booted him.
I don't believe so. We would just pay the 1,304.
Is that true, John?
Option one would be having, replacing the equipment at approximately $10,301 with an early buyout to Skycom at 1304.
The equipment would be given back to Skycom.
Correct.
There you go.
Right.
If we choose option two, we stay with the current equipment. We still have to pay the 1304 early buyout and pay him for his equipment that he's leaving behind.
Correct. That's what wasn't explained clearly. I think Cindy and I were on the wrong page, that either way, he's getting that money.
No, he either gets his equipment back or he gets money for his equipment.
He's going to get the 1,304 either way, but the
Yes,
3,500.
And we're
is-
gonna pay to hand it to him, correct, labor? When they put in the new, they'll be taking out his?
yes,
Because you said you didn't want him in here
correct.
cutting wires and yanking and pulling.
That was a recommendation from R.B. Lewis.
Just want it all on the table.
Yep.
So we are back to what's on the table.
Right.
Whether we want to spend $4,800 or whether we want to spend 11,600.
Well, the 11.6 has got that 13.05 anyway, so
Built in,
realistically, it's 10.3 versus,
3,530.
Right.
I feel better.
I'll make a motion to approve the 11,605.
We have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the 11.6. Further discussion? I would note that the recommendation is to take this from the building maintenance fund that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing no further discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, we've got 3 ayes and 1 opposed, so the motion carries, and we will go with option 1, it appears.
3 ayes?
Okay, next on the docket, we have the Rainbow Bridge composting lease proposal.
Just approved. Need to. I had both agreements, one for just the monitoring and one for the installing, depending on how you voted. So that is the agreement that you just voted on.
This is interesting. There's the other lease agreement if you want to see it. Okay, with the signature out of the way on that, I will move to the Rainbow Bridge composting lease proposal. And I believe we have the folks from Rainbow Bridge, which would be, it looks like Beth Kerr and Jen Hayes.
Yes. Hi, thanks for having us again.
Sure, and certainly begin.
So, Mr. Harrington forwarded you a proposal that we wrote up, and hopefully you guys had a chance to review it. And we're looking for feedback, what you think about that. Basically, we need to know yes or no, and with these amounts, if you guys need to think it over, so be it, and then it'll tell us where, you know, where we go forward from here, before we pay for engineering to bring to the planning board and
Yeah.
so forth.
Well, I think generally the board has looked favorably upon the project. I don't know what the board has thought in regard to the lease payment arrangement that is on the back of page 1 in the report that we've had for a little while now.
Yeah, do we have any recommendation or suggestion from Avatar or somebody? I don't, as far as what I,
Yeah, let's turn to John if you could.
Those land values came to you a couple of meetings ago, what the value of the land was?
yeah, I think the value of the land, but I
Right.
don't know how that relates to a lease
Calculating
of that land.
That's kind of up to us, because I agree with John, they gave us a price of what the land was worth if we were gonna sell it,
Yeah,
but right now, it's not generating us anything, as far as it's just sitting there. If this proposal makes sense to the rest of the board, I don't know that we have a way to come up with a figure other than accepting their offer.
Yeah, one of the things that I looked at when I first saw the report was it's NAS or NASIS, the National Acreage Appropriation for the USDA and the Department of Agriculture, which gives you a series of things you can look at for each state. It was not particularly helpful. It gives you what the lease value of cropland might be if it's in active production. It gives you the lease value of an acre of land based on how many head of cattle you could graze on it. A few other things like that. What I looked at when I looked at this, this is vacant, unimproved land as it stands now that we're getting no revenue from. And just sort of seat of the pants calculation, based on that lease payment schedule, we'd be getting essentially the equivalent of if that land was taxed as what it is, prior to improvement.
oh, okay.
But I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but there's also a caveat in there that it's a 3-year agreement, but I believe you wanted the option to discuss it after the first 12 months to see if it was a viable go-forward,
Correct. Yes.
which I think would only make sense, it's sort of our interest as well. We don't want a non-viable animal composting.
Right, right.
I think
Right.
they've done their homework as far as how they would leave it if it didn't work out, and they're picking up all the costs to go.
Yeah, the exit strategy is very simple. It doesn't get much more simple than that. It only needs a little bit of time to be a finished business. It doesn't cost much money to close the business, which is the beauty about this. So, we give you guys a 4 months heads up. Hopefully that doesn't come to that. Hopefully it's a viable business and it's working out great. But really, it just needs a 4-month exit strategy, and it's just letting the piles cure and deciding what to do with them, whether we spread it there to fertilize the area or we move it.
I just have a question on, I support the project. Our liability as far as leasing the property for this project, do we have any liability on that? Have we checked?
I think that the standard procedure for us would be, town-owned property is protected by our multi-peril policy that we have, although certainly that is not intended to cover their business interests, and we would want, to follow the standard protocol of being named an additional insured on a certificate of insurance with an A-rated carrier with limits appropriate as recommended by our carrier, which typically they would ask. It's quite likely that they're going to come back and want a certificate of insurance showing the base limits that we have on our underlying policy.
I can certainly check with Primex and see what their recommendations are based on whether this goes forward or not.
Yeah, and I think I would feel fairly comfortable, as I believe Primex will, as long as we're named an additional insured on your insurance policy, which would be standard practice.
Primex is your insurance carrier? Okay.
Yep.
And will they we offered a minimum of a 1 million liability policy. Will Primex have a recommendation or to that?
I'll have a discussion with them tomorrow, kind of lay out what the proposal is and maybe even share the proposal with them,
Sure.
and then get some direct feedback
Great.
that I can certainly share with the board and you.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing that I would note, I'd mentioned to some board members, I have a younger brother who's a commercial dairy farmer, and he operates a very similar facility for his own private use, and I totally amazed at how fast a 1,200-pound Holstein disappears and becomes
If it's done right,
appropriate
it's
garden
fast.
fodder.
I think it's something the town could use. I'd rather see them there than in some of the backyards that have them.
I've got some comments with regard to the agreement itself.
Yeah.
The mention about the lease payments to the town would begin after the solid waste permit has been acquired. There's no time frame there, but so I would suggest that we put in there lease payments to the town of Deerfield will begin 30 days after the solid waste permit has been acquired.
That's a good idea. Yep.
Otherwise, it could begin a year after or whatever.
Right. Nope, that certainly could be added in there.
With regard to no further collection of animal carcasses should the system fail, would be no more collection of animal carcasses from the date of notification to the town.
Okay.
Okay. And another question is, do we want some type of a closure bond to, per disturbed acre, to make sure that the closure is in accordance with whatever requirements that we may end up having. It's on the second page, with equipment going to be operating, and your proposal is to have a 7-day-a-week operation. I'm concerned that if we're going to have backup alarms, if any equipment is operating there, people probably are not going to be the butters are probably not going to be overly appreciative of hearing that
Right.
at least on a Sunday anyways. And whether we restrict it somewhat on a Saturday too. I know the abutters to the rock excavation on Parade Road are not overly happy with hearing backup alarms operating on weekends?
We certainly don't want to be, we want to be good neighbors. We don't
Mhm.
want to be a disturbance at all. We don't even want people to notice that we're there. So, do we
I think
have
the
to
scope,
operate
I
as a
think
backup alarm?
I think the scope of your equipment is a little different than, I would certainly
Yes.
agree with Fred, but you've got a farm tractor and a backhoe listed as your primary equipment here.
Aaron
and-
could speak more about the equipment.
Right, and our primary vehicles are gonna be small pickup trucks, so not large commercial dump trucks, things like that, so we're not gonna have backup alarms.
Okay.
And our equipment on site is gonna be like small farm tractors, small backhoe, items like that, that are relatively quiet. I mean, they do make noise, but they will not have backup alarms per se.
You really wouldn't need to be open Sunday from 8 to 7.
I'm sorry?
Excuse me, you wouldn't really need to be open Sunday from 8 to 7 if it was a,
For small animals, no. Unfortunately, large animals
isn't this as needed?
is as needed. If somebody called us on a Saturday or Sunday saying, we're planning to put our large animal down, we could schedule a Monday pickup, and we'd ask them, okay, maybe you can have the vet out on Monday morning to do the euthanasia, and then we pick it up. The large animals on the weekends, there's gonna be some scheduling we can do with that. And then there are the ones that die unexpectedly.
Right.
That something has to be done with them. That's up, we can discuss that more, certainly. We don't want to lose business, but if you don't want us to be operating on Sunday, we have to figure that out as well for our business, because we don't want to say no to people and look like we're not available. So we have to, would you have any ideas to that?
I was definitely not insinuating no on Sunday, just.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You needed 11 hours.
I think, yeah, my understanding of it would be that this would be as needed, that you're not planning on being constantly working for 10 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday, but that if somebody has a
Right.
large animal they need to bring, you would certainly take it
Right.
on
I
a
mean,
Saturday or Sunday.
The residents on Brown Road wouldn't even notice us driving with our F-250 with the trailer it's an enclosed trailer. They wouldn't even know what we have in it.
Right.
We'd pull up on the property. It'd be a very quick process to take the animal off the trailer and put it into its pad and then cover it up. It's relatively fast.
And one of the things that we could suggest in putting into an updated proposal would be that larger equipment where there's a use of a backup keeper, like a 10-ton truck or something, or a dump truck like that, we can keep that limited
To
to
Monday through
Monday
Friday.
through Friday deliveries and an expected business time, if that
Because
would
we're gonna
be
need
helpful.
our materials delivered, our recipe materials delivered. So that would just be Monday through Friday during the normal business hours. It wouldn't be, 8 or 9 at night, would be when those dump trucks run.
Mhm. And I guess you may have already answered my other question, is with regard to the transportation of the animal carcasses, so they would be within a trailer, so they'd be enclosed,
Enclosed.
and.
Or in the
you
back
wouldn't-
of a pickup that's enclosed as well.
Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
small enough, it would be in the back of one of our,
But it
covered.
wouldn't be an open pickup, it'd be enclosed.
our trucks have caps on them.
Okay,
Right.
all right, so, because I had a notation here, of making sure the animals were covered, but if the vehicles are enclosed, then that's not an issue. And the only other thing was with regard to the 100-foot buffer, just putting in a no-cut 100-foot buffer, just to
Yeah.
make it abundantly clear that you want to leave those trees that are there.
It's on the second page.
Okay, I'll just start again.
And we have no noise ordinance, so you can strike that piece.
We don't have to advertise that. I think what you're hearing is that the board is generally in support of the presentation that you've presented, some language changes that I think can be fairly easily made to the proposal, and John can talk to our insurer and find out exactly what they would want for insurance limits. I would suspect that they're likely to come back with 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. possibly not, but, and obviously the notation that we be named as an additional insured on a certificate.
Okay.
Other comments or concerns?
And I guess the question is, do we end up scheduling a hearing?
Yeah, I think we probably should have some sort of public hearing.
Obviously, there'll be one with the planning board, but whether we have one, and the planning board hearing would take place once they've already prepared plans, engineering plans for the site. If we're gonna have any strong opposition by any of the abutters, which could affect our vote on what to do, we should probably hear that from a hearing before they make
Spend the money.
expense.
Yeah.
We would appreciate that.
Is the board generally agreeable to hold a public hearing on the business proposal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How soon can we, I don't think that's not a requirement, so we're not under any particular, number of business days, but I don't know what our schedule
Well,
is.
7 days is the minimum between posting the hearing in a statewide or very visible location until you have it.
Would that be the 8th that we meet again?
I don't know. The first is when our scheduled meeting is,
We have it next Monday?
yes. So it'd have to be at least the following.
Following meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, is that too late? So,
No, no,
So 2 weeks.
well,
Two Mondays.
it might be 3.
I don't have that exact date in front of me.
Yeah, it could be
So not next Monday, but the following meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
But-
I agree to that. Do you agree to that?
that's fine.
Okay, we'll go ahead and find out what our insurance company has to say, if anything, and set about scheduling a public meeting and notifying abutters that there will be a public hearing.
Should I go ahead and notify the abutters or the residents of Brown Road?
Typically, if we're gonna hold a public hearing, we should probably do that.
Okay.
And we'll do it by mail.
Okay.
I mean, you're welcome to
We'll,
talk to anybody as well.
we'll have educational material to pass out for that hearing, and,
And essentially, what we typically do for that type of hearing is we will schedule the hearing, at the onset of the selectmen's meeting and
okay,
make that the first order of business.
great. Well, anything else?
Thank you.
All right. And, so you'll think about the lease amounts that we came up with, and you'll talk to Prime and see if,
Yeah, I didn't hear any particular objection to
No problem with it.
the lease payment schedule you brought forward. I think it's just that we want to make sure the insurance, our insurance company is on board with the limits proposed and that we have the public hearing.
great, okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Andy, before we move forward on the quote, if I can point out one other document in your packets.
Yeah.
You have a draft of an audit document that needs to be reviewed that is done every year from the Board of Selectmen. And I typically fill it out and let you folks review it. And if you are good with the answers, I do have an original to sign that I will return to the auditors.
Okay, this is the ethics and governance draft. And basically, I'll read the questions, so anyone has the ability to object from the floor this evening if they'd like to. There are 9 questions. Are you aware of actual or suspected fraud affecting the entity being the town? We tentatively answered no. Are you aware of any allegations of fraud, e.g. received in communications from employees, former employees, analysts, regulators, or others? We've tentatively answered no. 3, have you received any tips or complaints regarding the entity's financial reporting, including those received through internal whistleblower programs, if such programs exist, and if so, how have you responded to such tips and complaints? Tentatively answered no. Are you aware of any transactions entered into with related parties, i.e. members of governing body doing business with the organization? And we've tentatively answered no.
No.
Are you aware of laws or regulations that may be expected to have a fundamental detrimental effect on the operations of the entity? We've tentatively answered no. Are you aware of any non-compliance with laws or regulation? We've tentatively answered no. How does your board or council exercise oversight or management? How does your oversight address the risk of fraud for your entity? We've attached a sheet with an explanation of the town procedures with regard to that. Question number 8, what do you think the risks of fraud are within your organization? Have specific fraud risks been identified, types of transactions or operations, certain departments? If so, what steps have been taken to address those risks? None have been identified. If you answered yes to question 4, identify the related parties, including the nature of the relationship and types of transactions, and we did not identify any parties in item 4. I don't know if the board has any disagreement.
No,
Nope.
I agree.
Okay, if the board is in general agreement, I would entertain a motion to sign said agreement.
So move for the chairman to sign.
Second, oh, you get all aboard, right? Aye.
It's
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Appears to be unanimous. Okay, get that signed, and next order of business will be the fire and rescue roof quotes that we've received. I would note that we've received 2 quotes, one from Charlie Wheeler here in Deerfield and one from Eric O'Connell, also in Deerfield. We requested additional quotes, and the contractors were either not interested or didn't respond. And I see that Ray and the fire chief are here, so I don't know if you have a recommendation of the 2 for us.
Both of them are very good contractors.
Do you have a preference for the roof system recommended?
They want to go with the rubber roof because of the pitch on the building. It's like got a 12-4 pitch on it. It's relatively flat. The back stairs that go up to the rear entrance to the firehouse sits right on the roof. So for that reason, they didn't really want to go with a metal roof because of the wear and tear and the movement back and forth from the stairs.
Any idea, right, why there's such a price difference?
Eastern Exterior is a large corporation. They've done a lot of major buildings in Manchester, rather large company. Charlie Wheeler has his son. He's more of a handyman, construction, done it his whole life, but his overhead is not as much. So I believe basically that the difference in the prices are basically come down to who can afford to go lower. And I would say that would probably be Charlie.
These are 2 very different proposals. These roofs are very different.
Yes,
One's a membrane roof and one's a roll roofing.
correct.
So we're not even comparing apples to apples. I mean, this is,
No.
I know Charlie does a great job, but I would recommend we do the EPDM roof with the manufacturer's warranty.
Can Charlie do that, Jeff?
No, he's not a licensed installer. I don't believe he is. I mean, his proposal is for self-adhering rolled roofing, several layers, which might be fine, but my preference would be to do the fully adhered membrane roof.
Comes with a 15-year warranty.
20.
20.
20 on that one?
And that's a manufacturer's warranty too, so.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here is we've got a proposal for 7,200, that being the rolled roofing, and then a proposal for 7,668 plus 3,680 for the fully adhered membrane.
The difference is Charlie's gonna do the construction work down below as well, and Easton will not. They only do the roof.
So who's doing the 3680?
That's Eastern Exterior, that's part of their.
I thought he just said, that's the.
No, there's more work to be done than just the roof.
Oh, okay. So it's not, that's not in the bid?
Well,
Well,
it
it
is
is in
in the
Charlie's
Wheeler
bid.
proposal. Repair rooms where a generator is located.
So that really makes the rubber roofing more expensive then.
Easton Exterior doesn't do the carpentry and building.
But they do the trim, the
They do
soffits
the
and the
trim,
vinyl.
they just do the roofs.
We have to rely on Jeff on this.
Well, it's my recommendation. I mean, the rolled roofing is probably outlast the rubber roofing, but there's not the same warranty with it if something does fail. It's not a large roof, right? It's small.
No, it's very small. It's 32 feet long.
The people that did the town shed didn't want to bid on it? Highway garage?
There is no.
How long will this other roof last? The Charlie's roof? What's that got?
It could last a long time, right? But there's no warranty with it if something does fail. I'm sure it would be fine. It's just, I was just trying to say that these are two different roofing systems, so.
It's a tough situation because it's not really a big enough job to get a lot of the big companies
Right.
to bid on it, you know, so we can get the warranty. And a lot of them right now are gearing up for the summer. Don't want to take on a project of this size.
What's your recommendation? You've been doing this too, so.
Basically, it comes down to what we want out of that room. Is that something we're gonna change in the future, or, you know, is it something we're looking for a short-time fix so we can get another 10 years or so out of it, or if it's something that we wanna, you know, make it last for a long time, like 20 years? It would come down to that. I mean, I'm not at the fire station every day. I know that Matt needs the room, and he's gonna use it for storage, I believe, Matt. And, so short-term, I would say Charlie would probably be a good deal, you know, because we'll get it done and we'll get extra work because he's gonna do the construction part of it down below. We have to take that wall apart. We gotta pull the generator that's in there out. It's leaking, so there's, you know, there's sheetrock damage in there. And Easton won't do that. So if we go with Easton, we still have to find a contractor that will do that. I mentioned it to Rusty Truck, and I got no bid, so. Who's doing the upstairs?
I think hearing all that, I think I'd make a motion, we go with Charlie Wheeler with $7,200 and the extra work, and the roof will last. I'm sure he does a good job, so.
He's in town.
He's in, right.
I'll second it if that's the case.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion to award the fire department roof job to Charlie Wheeler Jr. at an amount of $7,200?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the vote appears to be unanimous, and I assume that Ray and John can relay that to Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you.
I will have a, actually, I do have the original with me, if you want to accept it tonight.
you want more than one signature on that, John, or?
I think one's fine.
Okay. And that's just the same document that we have a copy
Yep.
of. Next up, John, I don't know, were you waiting for Nick to discuss the Deck Tech flooring quotes with us?
I
Feel
believe
comfortable?
Jeff may be able to speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to have Nick here too to talk about it.
I can reschedule to the next
Yeah,
meeting.
I'd rather hear it.
Sure.
What they're doing is just, they're replacing one of the floors in one of the old classrooms.
Okay.
Nick's been working on it longer, so.
We will wait until we have Nick with us then to discuss the Parks and Rec flooring proposal in detail. That said, at this point, we need to go into non-public session, probably, what's it?
B.
B for personnel.
Thank you.
In the right area.
Yeah, somewhere by that yellow tab. It should be. Just a cheat sheet. I got it right here. 2B.
I'll make a motion, we go into non-public. 91, RSA 91A:3, Rule 2B, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Cindy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And yes, so we will adjourn briefly. We're going to include the fire chief with us and meet in the back room. That's not quite right, but. It is the back.
Because the people, the wife was in the back, she's just like yelling at him to slow down.
Okay, we are out of non-public session. I would note that no action was taken, and if I could get a motion to seal the minutes.
So move.
Second.
Second. Cindy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion for someone other than me to authorize the fire chief to add 2 additional names to our paid fire and rescue pool of employees.
I'll make that motion, the first one being our own John Dubianski at a rate of 16 per hour, and Benjamin Hoshwender from Newfields at a rate of 14 per hour.
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion?
And just to make it clear, these are for the part-time.
Part-time.
Right, and this is part of the roster, the pool of folks that we have available.
Right.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Appears to be unanimous. Sign the action request. Actually, I'm going to remember to spell my name this time, too. Okay, any new business that needs to be brought up? Old business? Hearing none, I would move to citizens' comments.
Harriet Cady, Old Center Road. I have 2 comments on tonight's business. In hearing the Wolfgram talk on abatement, I am concerned with the work Avatar does. First of all, any good appraiser knows that when you have an abutter buying property, you can't use it for a comp because they usually pay premium to have that parcel. From what I heard, he said he did pay premium, but the point of it all is, you don't use 7 or 8 parcels around town that don't have the same condition of an abutter buying in order to see the premium in it. The comparables we would never have been allowed to use in a state comparable for highway right-of-way. So I'd be very concerned about that. The second thing is the topography, and I know Fred or Andy riding by on that road have seen the topography. And with the other lots, did they have the same topo? And there's always to be a topography adjustment. If you look at your land on your assessment cards, there's topography adjustments for wetlands, for steep grade, various things you look at in topography. So I really am concerned about them sending it back with a denial and not explaining those things to the board. The board should have that kind of information before a citizen is outright denied. The second thing I'm concerned about is when Paul Aslan's equipment is removed, will we be able to be covered immediately with installation by R.B. Lewis? Or are we going to have a span where we won't have alarm systems for installation with those taken out? And I didn't hear you say anything about that, or if the contract mentions it.
Thank you, both valid points.
It should be looked at.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very well.
New record, 7:23.